Greece lightning, because when you're living in ancient Greece next to an area of the sea infested with giant hydras, what else are you gonna do other than racing with your ships as fast as possible, trying to feed them fish so that they don't feed on you? So Greece lightning, this is really the general idea. It's a fun, crazy, wacky idea. This is a competitive game published by WizKids, 2 to 4 players. It is placed on a highly random pizza-based or pizza-looking board. It is a circular racing track that you build by putting together 12 of these wedges here, and you shuffle them in groups, in sections. There are 4 sections. You shuffle each section separately and then you put them next to each other, so that allows some randomization, but at the same time it's not completely crazy, completely chaotic. There is still gonna be madness in that method and method in that madness. So you set up the board randomly, and then also you add this wedge here, which is the starting and finish line to any 20 place. So actually, why don't we put it here, which is a little closer to you? Then you will assign to each player one of these cards randomly. The small numbers you see at the bottom also determines the order. Lowest numbers get to place their ship on one of the starting dots first, but then the player that plays their ship last gets the first player token, which is very good for a variety of reasons. Each player also has a board such as this one, where they will place their dice. Also, it acts as a reminder of some game effects. And also these cards, remember, everybody gets a random one at the beginning. You also place that card there in one of the 2 slots, and then you can use it whenever the effect applies to gain the corresponding bonus. So we are ready to start our race. You also get some fish at the beginning of the game. Very important currency, because you need to feed it to the hydra so they don't eat you. Now, they don't really eat you, but they do slow you down quite a bit. At the beginning of each round, everybody will roll dice, especially if you're playing with a younger player. You may want to go one player at a time, so you check that the younger players are not making mistakes. Otherwise, everybody can do this phase at the same time. First, you roll your navigation die. Everybody has 2 regular dice and a navigation die. Your navigation die only shows numbers between 1 and 3, and you place your navigation die there. Then you take one of your movement dice and you roll it and you place it right there. Then you can choose to roll your second navigation die also, but this is optional, because this is the catch. If you decide to roll the second die and it is lower than your first, then you go bust and you lose both of your movement dice. So with a 5, probably I'm gonna be happy, because the only way for me not to go bust and actually get the benefit from a second movement die would be to roll a 5 or a 6. Not great. But if my first roll was a 2, then chances are that I decide to go and roll my optional second die. And now I do have a movement of 9. Otherwise, if I decided to stop the first time, I would have a movement of 7. That's the general idea. There's a push or luck element there. Also, I can spend the fish to reroll any die, the navigation die or the movement dice. So maybe I do want to see if I can get lucky, and I do decide to spend some fish to get a reroll and a really cool movement. So whatever happened there, suppose this is what I roll. Every player will have a number of movement points to spend, and then you go. Really, that's the general idea. That players will alternate taking turns, starting with the player that has the golden fleece / first player token. Also, for that player, the number on the navigation die counts as double. So if I am the first player, actually now I have 4 + 1 + 5, which is probably somewhere between 9 and 15. I'm not like a great mathematician. So I'm going to move by that number of dots, moving, following the connections that you see here. always moving clockwise. You can't move backward. And then, well, as I move, several things may happen. This is really crazy. See, as I was telling you. If I stop on an area with an Hydra, I need to feed some fish to the Hydra. Otherwise, I had to stop for the rest of the turn fighting with the Hydra. Really annoying. If I, however, enter a space with an Hydra, and the dot that I use is within the range of my navigation die, or you can say, you know, the number of dots that I'm traveling is equal to or lower than the navigation die, then I'm still safe from the Hydra. I simply ignore the Hydra effect. So if you meet that Hydra early on in the turn, you don't have to worry about it. That's a nice little touch, because that means that the Hydra can be powerful, but you're not going to skip your entire turn or almost your entire turn, move 1 or 2, and be killed by an Hydra or slowed down by an Hydra. I may move into, that's an illegal move, but to show you, one of these whirlpools areas. We need to go very close. As you can see, they have multiple arrows with numbers on them. This one has 1, and the other one is 2, 3. That one is 1, 2, 3. That means once I enter there, I can only exit from an arrow that matches a number on my board. In this case, for example, I could choose between 1 and 2. Look at that. I can go wherever I want. If it's there, it's 1 or 2. But it may be that there's only one number. There will always be a number between 1 and 3 on your board because of the navigation die, in which case I'm stuck going wherever it is that the arrow sends me. If I step, or if I move to a spot that has a fish, then I collect a fish. If I move to a spot with a lightning bolt, then I collect a card, those favor cards that you saw earlier, which may be good but doesn't have to be, because these represent the interventions of the Greek gods, and you know, those can be just a little bit weird and finicky and unpredictable. Some are good, some are not so good. Some affect you, some affect other players. Huge range of effects there. I may also end up moving onto a spot that has a wedge symbol. At first sight, they're a little too similar for my taste to the Hydras, but as you're actually playing the game, it's not that confusing. But that is just a wedge representing the kind of wedges that the board is made of. So actually, the idea is you roll dice. After you roll dice, then players will move and they will collect stuff and resolve effect as they go. The full player's turn structure, however, is this. You first start by placing the slices of the board that you collected the previous round. Suppose that I collected 2, then before I move, I get to place them. I cannot place them on the starting tile, and I cannot place on any tile that has a ship on it. Other than that, I can place it in front of me, behind me, right in front of my opponent if there's something super annoying that would happen. Without those restrictions, there is no limit to how many slices you play in a specific location, although that is unlikely to happen in practice. So you start the turn by placing any section of the board that you may have collected earlier. Then you move, which may cause you to collect some cards. Then you reveal the cards that you drew that turn. And if it's a lightning bolt effect, you resolve it right away, simply doing what the card says. Or it may be an effect that is long-lasting, in which case you place it on your board, or you give it to another player if it's an effect that affects another player. So this is the general idea. Roll, move, resolving the effects that I described, and just try to go around the board as fast as you can. There's a lap counter. We're gonna complete 2 full laps. As soon as a player completes their second lap, and you're still gonna go as far as possible after you do that, a player completing their second lap triggers the end of the game. Everybody finishes their turn so that everybody has an equal number of turns, and at the point, the player who is the furthest past the finish line wins the game. Grease Lightning is a really fun, pretty chaotic, but also very, 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 very light game that I think of mainly as a family game. I enjoyed playing it with my daughters that are currently 9 and 10. After the pandemic, when I resume regular game night with adult friends, I don't think this is going to be a game that is going to be is going to work in that setting. Just because the element of randomness, just because the chaos, and just because there's a lot of work going on, and sometimes you wonder if your choices are all that relevant after all. And maybe you place there a slice, preparing something for you, but the way it works is that instead of getting on a nitro on a dot, you get on a nitro on the following dot, which may or may not matter. Instead of getting a fish now, you get it later. Sometimes I do wonder the different tracks really, they do matter, but is the planning that they do around those matter, or do I end up moving around the track that ultimately is fairly randomly organized? Because the track can change quite a bit by the time the game goes back to me, which also means that there is a little danger for analysis paralysis, because there's not much of a point for me to plan too much ahead when the other players may just change the configuration of the track significantly. So I play with 3 players. I don't think that I need to play with 4, maybe a 2. Probably that's when the game would shine more. But again, as a light family game, if you don't take it too seriously, if you don't worry too much about the potential for analysis paralysis, and most importantly, again, the vast random element, then it's just enjoyable, and that's the simple and definitely most important truth about this. I enjoyed playing it with my daughters. Now, the turns are surprisingly involved, I would say. It's almost like power turns. You may have a lucky turn and you almost complete half of the track. I've seen that happen. Matter of fact, probably you play 6, 7 turns, maybe 8, not much more. Again, because covering a third and almost a half of the track in a single turn is not all that difficult. So the game is actually pretty short, but again, each turn really matters, which again, more reason why I don't think I want to play with 4 players, because I think that just delays the game too much and makes it too chaotic. But each turn, you're moving 10, 12 spaces. As you do that, other stuff happens. I pick up a fish, I spend a fish, I do this, I do that. I'm going to manipulate things in a certain way, so I get out of a certain vortex in a certain direction. So each turn is pretty involved, and you have to sit around as other players are sitting their turn. Again, with 3 players, not much of a problem. With 2, I don't see that being a problem at all. 4, maybe. So, also, by the way, as I said, the game is pretty short. So again, it's pretty important that you take big turn, and then you don't have to wait around for too long. The game is over pretty quickly. The box says 45, 60 minutes. I don't see that happening. Again, maybe with 4 players, and that would be too long. The game plays in about 30 minutes easily. So, pretty chaotic, but overall fun. Again, at least I had a good experience. I'll be blunt, I don't think it's a great game because of the chaos, because of the randomness, because of the pace of the game. But it's entertaining from time to time. If my daughters want to play it, I definitely will be happy to play with them. Again, I don't think it's going to become a classic in our collection or everywhere in the hobby, but it's not bad. It's an entertaining, simple, light, chaotic, heavily luck-based family game.